They say betrayal doesn't hit you like a bullet. It bleeds you out slowly. That was exactly how it felt that morning in room 502 of the executive wing at Meridian Retail Corporation, one of the largest chains in the Midwest, headquartered just outside Columbus, Ohio. I'd been invited to a strategy review meeting with our director of operations, Steve Callahan, expecting a discussion about next steps for the holiday rollout I'd spearheaded. Instead, I found myself watching my coworker, Nathan Ellis, deliver a pitch that sounded disturbingly familiar. Every slide, every term, every insight, word for word, it was mine. Steve clapped Nathan on the back and said, "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need leading our merchandising direction." And just like that, a handshake later, Nathan was promoted to senior merchandising manager, while I sat silently, hands clenched beneath the polished oak table, forcing a nod and a thin-lipped smile. That strategy? The one now earning Nathan the corner office and a $30,000 pay bump? I had developed it over the course of 4 painstaking months, sifting through sales trends, mapping regional buying patterns, building price elasticity models, and testing it across 3 pilot stores. I'd lived and breathed that project. Hell, I'd skipped Thanksgiving dinner with my family to finish a segment of the predictive model because I knew the board meeting was right after the holiday. And now, it had someone else's name stamped across it. My name is Marcus Bell. I'm 34 years old, and for the last 5 years, I worked as a merchandising analyst at Meridian Retail. I hold a degree in business analytics from the University of Illinois, and if there's one thing I do well, it's spotting what the market wants before it even knows it. My cube was always littered with spreadsheets, heat maps, and scribbled on whiteboards. Some people saw chaos. I saw opportunity. But in that moment, sitting under the blinding fluorescent lights of that conference room, all I could see was red. The moment I stepped out of that conference room, I knew something had changed, not just in my career, but in me. I walked straight past the congratulatory backslaps Nathan was collecting like baseball cards, past the fake smiles, past the assistant who offered me coffee like it might fix the knot in my stomach. I headed straight to the parking garage, sat in my car, and just stared at the steering wheel. I replayed every moment of the past few weeks. The sudden way Nathan had asked to collaborate, the overly enthusiastic interest in my forecasting models, the way he'd started dropping by my desk under the pretense of learning more about the data. He said he admired how I approached problems, that I thought in layers like a chess player. And I believed him. That was my mistake. Nathan had joined the company just under 2 years ago, fresh out of a fancy MBA program in Boston, dressed in tailored suits and armed with polished buzzwords. He was likable, slick, confident, always with a well-timed joke in the break room. People assumed he was a prodigy, but behind the charm, I started noticing the gaps. He never built models from scratch, didn't know how to clean raw sales data, and once asked me what a sigmoid function was. But he was connected. His fraternity brother was one of the senior VPs at a competing retail chain. He played racquetball with Steve Callahan, our director. And when he started hanging around me during the holiday planning sprint, I thought, stupidly, that maybe he actually wanted to learn. I'd spent nights in the office going over store heat maps, running predictive tests to see which SKUs were lagging, and building out a consumer segmentation model I designed from scratch. Nathan? He brought coffee and managed communication. And then, 3 days before the presentation, he said, "Hey man, I think I should deliver the pitch. You know I'm stronger on my feet, and we want this to land. I'll be sure to credit you." That last line, "I'll be sure to credit you," was the lie that twisted the knife. I nodded back then, still clinging to the idea that teamwork mattered more than ego. But when I sat in that conference room and heard him call it my merchandising breakthrough, when he threw out my custom-built terminology as if it was his native tongue, I felt something go cold in me. What Nathan didn't realize was that while I'm quiet, I'm not blind. I had emails. I had time-stamped drafts. I had version histories and files he never bothered to delete properly. I never intended to weaponize my process, but now it was time to consider that maybe the only way to stay clean was to get a little dirty. That night, I went home and opened a folder on my laptop I had labeled Holiday Deck Strategic Notes. Inside were the original market simulations, customer journey charts, and personalized language I had developed, language that Nathan had reused word for word. I started cataloging it all methodically. I didn't even know what I'd do with it yet. I just knew I wasn't going to sit quietly and let someone like Nathan Ellis ride my work into executive leadership. The next morning, I came in early. I walked past Nathan's new office, his nameplate still fresh, the blinds half open, sunlight pouring in like the room itself was gloating, and returned to my corner cube. My inbox was filled with corporate fluff, updates about benefits, a company-wide newsletter about Nathan's promotion, and a forwarded message from HR reminding me to support the new vision. I didn't reply. I spent the day doing what I did best, analyzing. But this time, I wasn't looking at sales data. I was studying patterns inside my company. Who got promoted? Who got reassigned? Who got forgotten? And one thing became clear: Meridian didn't reward talent. It rewarded alignment. Political alignment. Social alignment. Nathan hadn't just stolen my strategy. He had played the internal game I never wanted to touch. I called my old roommate from grad school that night, Jason Carver, now the hiring lead at Riverton Collective, a rising retail disruptor based out of Minneapolis. I asked him, casually, if they were looking for strategic analysts. His answer was better than I could have hoped for. Funny timing, he said. We're scaling like crazy. We need someone who knows how to lead with data. You want in? I told him I'd think about it. But in truth, the answer had already started to form the moment Nathan smiled at me through the glass office and gave me a thumbs up. This wasn't over. By the time Monday rolled around, I had already made my decision. I was leaving Meridian, but I wasn't going to sneak out the back door. I was going to leave with proof, with impact, and with my integrity intact. I didn't tell anyone, not even the few colleagues who still showed flashes of sincerity when they passed my desk. I kept my tone steady, my report sharp, and my head down. But in the background, I was moving with surgical precision. That week, I updated my portfolio, a real one, not some glossy resume, but a digital vault containing every major initiative I had led or built. It included detailed notes, methodology breakdowns, user behavior simulations, and performance results across 4 holiday seasons. I stripped out anything that could be tied back to group projects. This was mine. This was what I had built with my own 2 hands and a data-scarred keyboard. I also ran a side-by-side comparison. On the left, I placed the internal deck Nathan had submitted to Director Callahan. On the right, my original drafts, including the file metadata and creation dates. It wasn't just similar, it was identical. Phrases, charts, even my custom color scheme. The man hadn't even changed the axis labels on one of the pricing elasticity charts. It was my work, down to the last bullet point. Nathan, for all his surface charm, had no depth. He was a strategist in name only. And that weakness? It was about to matter more than either of us realized. On Thursday, I got a call from Jason Carver at Riverton. You still interested? He asked. Depends, I replied. Base starts 30 over what you're making, plus relocation if needed. Full benefits. And you'd report directly to the VP of Market Expansion. No fluff, no corporate layers. We want someone who could drive strategy, not just make slide decks look pretty. I didn't say yes right away. I asked for the weekend to think. But in my head, I already knew I was done waiting for recognition in a place that saw me as a tool. I was going somewhere that valued thinking over politics. Friday morning, I came into the office to find Nathan standing at the whiteboard in the break room, holding court again. He was sketching out a refined approach for spring inventory. I glanced at the board and couldn't help but smirk. He was trying to adapt my segmentation model, but he'd stripped out the behavior-based clusters, the most essential component. Without that layer, it was just a generic demographic grid that anyone could have pulled from a marketing blog in 2015. He turned and gave me that same thumbs up, that same smug little nod. And right then, I realized something important. Nathan believed I would always stay in the background. That no matter how much he stole, I'd remain silent. Supportive. Useful. He was wrong. That afternoon, I scheduled a meeting with HR under the guise of discussing future growth opportunities. What I really needed was a paper trail. I expressed concerns carefully about career development, visibility, and the distribution of credit on cross-functional projects. I didn't accuse anyone outright. I didn't need to. I wanted a record. something verifiable. Then, I messaged Jason. Let's talk offer details. By Monday morning, my offer was in writing, my notice typed, and my mind calm. But I wasn't just walking away. I was handing Meridian the rope they had handed Nathan months ago. I drafted a formal resignation letter to Director Callahan. In it, I was gracious, professional, and just slightly too specific. I thanked him for the opportunity to contribute to the holiday strategy that led to a 22% regional sales increase, a figure that only I had previously cited in internal emails. I referenced my work on the pricing optimization model, the consumer clustering algorithm, and the competitive elasticity framework, all terms that had mysteriously shown up in Nathan's recent work. I hit send, and I waited. The reaction came quickly. Callahan called me into his office 30 minutes later. "You're leaving?" he asked, his tone oddly flat. "Yes," I said simply. "Can I ask why?" "I've been presented with an opportunity that aligns more clearly with my long-term goals. Somewhere my work will be fully utilized." There was a pause, a flicker of understanding, or maybe just guilt, flashed behind his eyes. "Well," he said eventually, "I can't say I'm not surprised. But if that's your decision, I wish you well." He didn't try to counteroffer, and that told me everything I needed to know. They'd never seen me as indispensable, just efficient. Nathan, on the other hand, didn't take the news so gracefully. He knocked on my cubicle that afternoon like we were old friends catching up after college. "Man, I just heard. You're really leaving." "Yeah, that's wild. I mean, we had a good thing going, right? Your data, my pitch style, we were killing it." I looked him square in the eye. "We weren't a team, Nathan. You were using me, and now you're going to have to stand on your own." His smile faltered. "Hey, no hard feelings, right?" "No, just facts." He stood there for a moment longer, trying to figure out if I was bluffing. Then he nodded, gave an awkward half laugh, and walked off. I spent the next 2 weeks cleaning up, organizing files, and watching as Nathan scrambled to replicate systems he barely understood. His upcoming presentation to the board was going to be a disaster, and I wasn't going to be there to clean up the mess. But I wasn't just leaving a sinking ship. I was about to help build a faster one, smarter one, stronger one. And soon, Nathan and Director Callahan would feel the wake I left behind. It started as a quiet whisper, a few lines buried in a trade journal, something about supplier transitions and strategy realignments. But in retail, those whispers travel fast. And within 2 weeks, Meridian's loss of Stratwell and Thorne had become a front-page conversation across the industry. The numbers didn't lie. Without Stratwell's high-margin seasonal lines, Meridian's quarterly earnings call was full of vague explanations and spin. Stock analysts started asking questions. Investors got twitchy. The board, once enamored with Nathan Ellis' innovative merchandising vision, now wanted deliverables. Proof. Results. And there were none. The dominoes were falling. Back at Riverton, we were expanding our deal with Stratwell. I'd led the rollout of a new omni-channel integration strategy, blending predictive supply logic with customer segmentation, and the results were immediate. Inventory moved faster, returns dropped, and customer satisfaction climbed. What Nathan once called fluff analysis was now driving measurable profit gains. Then came the moment that solidified everything. I was asked to speak at the Midwest Retail Intelligence Conference in Indianapolis. The theme, data-driven disruption in a legacy market. It was an invite-only speaker lineup, and Meridian was set to attend as one of the panel participants. Not Nathan, though. It was Callahan himself, who was scheduled to speak on behalf of the company. I almost laughed when I saw the brochure. My keynote was slotted right after his. The auditorium was packed. Industry leaders, analysts, journalists, suppliers. I walked on stage in a charcoal suit, tie loosened just enough to look confident, but not smug. And for 40 minutes, I walked them through how Riverton was turning data into decisions. Real-time analysis, granular segmentation, customer lifecycle modeling, and supplier integration that didn't just move product, but built trust. I showed numbers, charts, regional heat maps. And then I dropped the real blow. One slide. Clean. Simple. Legacy merchandising strategy versus dynamic segmentation. On the left, Meridian's outdated model, categorized by age, gender, income, and guesswork. On the right, our system, driven by behavior clusters, predictive pricing sensitivity, and location-aware demand shaping. I didn't name names, but I didn't have to. Callahan was in the front row, arms crossed, face stone cold. He knew. Everyone did. After the talk, I was swarmed. Vendors asking for demo access. Small chains requesting consulting help. And a few familiar faces from Meridian mid-tier managers who said things like, "We always knew that stuff came from you." But the final crack came a week later. I got a message from Beth Kramer, an old colleague from Meridian's merchandising team. She was one of the quiet ones, the kind who watched and remembered. Her email was short. "Thought you'd want to know. Nathan just got reassigned. No announcement. No email blast. Just gone from the org chart. Looks like the board had enough." I leaned back in my chair at Riverton and stared out at the city skyline. It wasn't joy I felt. It was justice. Nathan had played his game. He'd built a house out of someone else's bricks. And when it crumbled, there was no foundation underneath to hold him up. As for me, I wasn't chasing titles anymore. I was building something better. Something lasting. Every strategy one rolled out had my name on it. Every chart, every insight, every win, it was mine. And I earned it the right way. Meridian thought they could erase me. Instead, I erased their future. By the time Riverton Collective entered Q3, the company had already doubled its market share in 2 key regions. Our analytics-led merchandising model was now being cited in national retail studies. Internally, people started calling it the Bell Framework. I never asked for that label, but I'll admit it felt good to hear it. I was no longer the guy building someone else's vision. I was the architect now. Then came the opportunity that would change everything. During a quarterly strategy session with the executive board, our CFO laid out a bold proposal. Riverton had been quietly in talks with Alderaan Retail Systems, a mid-sized chain of home and lifestyle stores with a strong presence in suburban and rural markets across the Midwest and South. They had infrastructure, loyal customers, but no digital backbone, no predictive analytics, no modern merchandising system. They've got shelf space, but no strategy, said the CFO. We bring that. We win the future. I was asked to lead the integration strategy. The scale was massive. 27 states, 180-plus retail locations, thousands of SKUs across seasonal, decor, and home improvement categories. But this was my arena. I didn't blink. I spent the next 3 months buried in data. Store layouts, customer behavior by zip code, supply chain inefficiencies, product overlap, profit margin tiers, you name it, I dissected it. My team, now 10 analysts strong, worked in sync like a machine. We built a playbook from scratch. No recycled PowerPoints. No fluff. Just raw, tested strategy. We called it Project Keystone. At its heart was a supplier matrix I had developed, cross-referencing top-performing product categories with local buying habits, price elasticity, seasonal predictability, and social media sentiment analysis. It allowed us to predict, with uncanny accuracy, which products would surge in specific regions before demand even hit. We pitched it to Alderaan's executive team. They said yes in under 30 minutes. Within 60 days, the first test stores launched with the Keystone strategy. The results were explosive. Sales rose by 26%, waste dropped by nearly 40%, and customer engagement hit all-time highs. The news spread fast. Trade publications dubbed it the Alderaan Riverton breakthrough. Industry panels cited it as the model for retail's next chapter. And Meridian? They started bleeding talent. One by one, their best people started jumping ship, some landing at Riverton, others scattering across the market. The ones who stayed found themselves stuck under new leadership, desperate to recapture the momentum they'd let slip through their fingers when they'd bet on Nathan. One evening, just after the Alderaan rollout had made headlines, I got an unexpected call. It was from Director Steve Callahan, the same man who once watched Nathan steal my work and handed him a promotion with a smile. "Marcus," he said, voice thinner than I remembered, "I've been following your success. Impressive work. Really, what you've built at Riverton is exactly the kind of vision we always needed at Meridian. I wonder if you'd ever consider." I stopped him there. "Steve," I said, voice calm, "I gave Meridian my best ideas. You handed them to someone who didn't understand them. He was silent. Then, it was a mistake. I see that now. Some mistakes you don't get to fix, I replied. You just live with them. And I hung up. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished, like I closed a chapter that no longer needed me. A few days later, Riverton CEO called me into his office. He offered me a new title, Vice President of Strategic Merchandising and Analytics. Time to put your name on the building, he said. It came with everything, stock options, profit share, and a seat at the table where company-wide decisions were made. But the real reward? I got a lead. On my terms. With truth. And every time I walked past the data wall showing our latest store rollouts, every time I watched a junior analyst light up when their model worked, every time a supplier emailed us to say they'd never felt more understood, I knew. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was legacy. There are moments in your life when everything changes, not in a dramatic explosion, not in the climax of some corporate drama, but in the stillness that comes afterward, the silence that lets you finally hear yourself think. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, stayed focused, and didn't make noise, people would see my value, that my results would speak for themselves. But results don't speak when someone else is holding the microphone. That's the truth I learned at Meridian. And it took being betrayed, watching my strategy presented by someone else, my work turned into their promotion, for me to finally understand that being silent isn't noble. It's just invisible. The irony is that Nathan didn't ruin me. He revealed me to myself. He taught me what I wasn't willing to tolerate anymore. And the truth is, I didn't just walk away from a company. I walked away from a version of myself that kept waiting for permission to be recognized. At Riverton, I didn't wait. I built. I shared ideas not to get credit, but to create momentum. I lifted others the way I wish I'd been lifted. And in return, I found a culture that didn't just tolerate intelligence. It depended on it. Every time we launched a new model, every time a supplier chose us, every time a store outperformed projections, I felt something I never felt at Meridian. Not just pride, but peace. Because this time, there was no one standing in front of me, claiming it as theirs. This time was my voice, my vision, my name. I think back to those nights at my old desk, pizza boxes, cold coffee, charts scrawled on legal pads, and I don't feel bitterness anymore. I feel gratitude, because every sacrifice I made, every ounce of energy I poured into that work, wasn't wasted. It just needed the right soil to grow in. Nathan? He's probably still trying to find someone else's ideas to pitch. Maybe Callahan's still in meetings, trying to salvage what's left of their strategy. But that's not my story anymore. My story is proof. Proof that real work wins. Proof that integrity outlasts charm. Proof that your silence won't protect you, but your voice? Your voice can build empires if you choose to use it. So if you're listening to this, sitting in your own version of that cold conference room, feeling overlooked, feeling like someone else keeps getting ahead with your work, I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me sooner. You're not crazy. You're not imagining it. And you do not have to stay quiet to be professional. Speak up. Stand tall. Build something they can't take from you. And then, walk out that door with your head high. Because the minute you stop waiting for recognition and start demanding alignment with your value is the moment your real career begins. Mine did, and I'm never going back. If this story struck a nerve, if you've ever sat in silence while someone else took your moment, your voice, your vision, then you know exactly how it feels to be underestimated. Don't stay quiet. Don't wait for someone to give you permission. Start building the thing they can't take from you. If this story gave you strength, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're ready to never let your silence be mistaken for weakness again, hit that subscribe button. There's more coming, because this is just the beginning.